Yeah, it is so painful because, and we discuss it in the bio episode. So this is a bit of a spoiler. I will give you half a second to go pause this and listen to it. That's over now. The
Welcome to Casuals of Runeterra, episode 104. I'm your host, Ryan, here with your other host, Hedge.
what's up, everybody? I hope you've got your parkas on, maybe some hot cocoa, because we're just gonna be chill today.
Yeah, we're going to start out chill. It's going to get sad. It's going to get real sad. I want to give a disclaimer up top. This story, we're talking about Gnar's story today. This story towards the end okay, put it this way. It starts off as a solid story, pretty straightforward. And the last part, because all good stories are in 3 parts, is really well written and hits you like a sack of rocks. But I just want to let you know up top, it starts off kind of, fun-loving adventure, and then it gets really dark with this under themes or themes behind the scenes. Make it rhyme a little bit. Anyways, housekeeping. You ready, Hedge? Ready for housekeeping?
I mean, of course, it's at the top.
You can listen to us everywhere. Email us at podcastcore@gmail.com. That's podcast COR. Visit us at podcastcore.com for all of our info, and then follow us wherever you prefer, or follow us everywhere because that helps us with discoverability on all the platforms. We appreciate that. And then leave a like, a comment, a review. We like to hear what you think. But how we've made it this far is by word of mouth. So tell a friend to Shibanufu by listening to the Casuals of Runeterra podcast.
All right, that's our episode, everybody. Because Hatch is leaving.
So as I said, we're talking about Snow Day, which is Gnar's story. If you haven't listened to our Gnar episode, that was the last episode. Go listen to it. What are you doing?
We're growing in order, all right? Like, go in order with us.
So we start off this story where we sort of left off, right? Gnar's in the future. He's kind of still doing his thing. He's very simple, remember that. And this story starts off with a Freljord blizzard that begins to howl outside of a cave. And in this nearby cave, Gnar is also howling in anger because it's this unrelenting snow that he's not used to. It's kind of messing with his plans because he wants to scurry around and go on an adventure. He then decides to pull some snow into the cave, and it begins to pile up, and then he begins to draw something, good old cave action. When in doubt, when you don't have cable, you make do. And from memory, he's starting to be able to draw things that he doesn't quite remember, but is channeling through his artistry. And he draws this one-eyed monster with tentacles the size of a mountain. Dun, dun, dun.
And this is one of the reasons that we're saying, if you haven't listened to our Gnar episode, like the bio episode, go listen to it, because we do touch on that. There's a big part of his story. But it is nice to see that Gnar has retained a little bit of his memory from like the last moments of being in the valley before Freljord became what we know today. Because that's one of those things that you always have to kind of question whenever you have like the Frozen in Ice storyline is, hey, amnesia or not? Are we on daytime soap opera or are we on the big screen? So we got a little bit of both here.
Yeah, and we move on to where he's now admiring his work. He's made this painting. He doesn't really know what it means in the grand scheme. We'll get into kind of some flickers of memories later down the road as well. This is the first step, but he begins to hear actual footsteps out approaching his cave. And he looks at the picture and he looks at the cave and he hears the sounds and he's like, oh, this is like a prophecy, right? I've summoned this monster again and I'm ready to do battle. He's scared, but he's thrilled because he's Gnar at this possible challenge. He gets to stand his ground, and he stands on his hind legs and he grips his boomerang and he's ready for action.
And we do know, as far as like following his storyline in the bio, that like having the boomerang, like this is like it kind of matches more the Yordle thing, because Gnar doesn't have a lot of the Yordle esque bits to him, and that's simply just because he doesn't talk. He just says Shabanuva. But he loves that boomerang, and the so it's a combination of having something that he's familiar with and that he really likes, combined with just hey, I was sick and bored because of the stupid snow.
Yeah.
So yeah, sure, this is a fight, but that's going to be more fun than playing in the snow. Like I was going stir crazy in here. You're trapped in here with me.
So this takes us to our second part where he's not, he's ready, but it's not a one-eyed monster. Obviously, we know that as the reader. What he expected doesn't come to fruition. What does is a creature. And I'll read directly from the quote here that says, "Rather than tentacles, it has legs, stout and stocky. Coarse fur covers its entire body, forming a frosted mane to crown its head and back. Its scarred face appears worn and bitter, marked by two ivory tusks and a stiff, pudgy snout. It's a Dravask." I believe that's how we decided to name it.
Yes, we went with Dravask, and that's canon now. Because remember, we make the rules on pronunciation.
So the Dravask lumbers inside of Gnar's cave, and he starts messing up his snow painting. It doesn't know what it's doing, right? It's just trying to find warmth, like an animal would do. But Gnar will have none of that, and he immediately beams the creature between the eyes with his boomerang, which is ironic because if you listen to our previous episode, his boomerang is made from the bone of a Dravask. So it's kind of insulting when you think about it at a meta level.
And it's specifically from the jawbone of a Dravask. Yeah. So then he's hitting a Dravask with a piece of a face of a Dravask, and he's hitting that Dravask in the face. So that is like some face-on-face action.
This is good writing, folks. This is how you do it, okay? Nuance is important. But so he hits the beast, it roars, and then we just get a good old kaiju battle that begins because now in big mode, Gnar and this thing are tussling outside the cave. Gnar gets knocked down, but as the creature prepares a big charge, Gnar yells in defiance, dodges the charge, slams the creature in the back, and slams it into the cave entrance, and then rocks tumble onto the now still creature. And Gnar thinks, he's like, it's sleeping. But why is it sleeping with its eyes open? Uh-oh.
Yeah, so this is kind of nice, like, because it does answer a question that I think that none of us really stopped to ask, which is how deep of an intelligence levels does Gnar possess? Because, I mean, sure, like, it's easy to say that he's, big and dumb just because, like, he transforms into a kaiju and he goes unga booga. But I mean, he's still a Yordle. Like Yordles are advanced creatures. They have a society and social skills. So this is a good way of like kind of really balancing out, to the readers just how intelligent Gnar is, because now Gnar's got to come to terms with the concept of death. But also this means that his intelligence is a little childlike.
Yeah.
And no one likes the idea of a child learning about death for the first time.
Exactly. So this is the part we warned you about at the beginning. So we go into part 3 here, where the snow around the boar, begins to turn red, and Gnar is getting confused. He thinks the snow is just turning red, right? Like it's bad snow. And he actually responds by hyperventilating. So he's starting to have a panic attack. And during this panic attack, he's getting these rushes of memories where in the past, like Hedge talked about in our last episode, he would see tribes yelling gibberish at each other, throwing spears and fighting until one tribe fell asleep in the red snow. And that phrase is, like I put here, is one of the most beautiful yet haunting phrases to depict death from a childlike view. That is so well written to really encapsulate his mind frame. for the specific moment.
Yeah, it is so painful because, like, and we discuss it in the bio episode. So this is a bit of a spoiler. I will give you half a second to go pause this and listen to it. That's over now. The uh, but yeah, so Nar enjoys, like, in his time in his time before takes the Captain America sleep, he enjoys kind of following around the mortals.
Yeah.
He not really associating himself with them, but watching them, very similar to like Poppy and Tristana, where they or Timo, where it's Yordles that are just watching the mortals because it's like, oh, what the hell are these?
Mhm.
And they're so different from us, and just kind of enjoying like the learning more about them, but not really putting themselves with their societies.
Yeah.
Because for Gnar, he spent more time with the Yetis. He liked hanging out with the Yetis, so he's like, no, I'm gonna hang out with them, but I'm still gonna watch the mortals.
Yeah.
Because that was how he learned how to hunt. That was how he learned what things to forage for in the valley. So he knew that there were big things happening because he was watching the mortals, and noticed that instead of working together, they were now arguing with each other and then sleeping in red snow.
Yeah.
And now he's learning, getting to see the red snow up close. Like, we can now assume that all the times that he's experienced watching them sleep in the red snow, it's from afar.
Yeah.
Which is also kind of more horrifying too, because that means that it's this kid sitting on like a cliff top looking down on a what we can only assume is a giant battlefield, because he wants to stay far enough away to not be noticed by the mortals.
Yeah.
So he's from a distance able to see enough bodies lying in snow to see that the snow has turned red and that they're asleep.
Yeah.
So yeah, now that he knows what the red snow is and what that means, he's now having these flashbacks and like, oh no, oh no, I have trauma.
Yeah. It's literally PTSD.
It's like, I have trauma and I didn't even know it. And that's why he's going through this like rabbit hole of anxiety right now. And that's, man, that's rough. And the more that they kind of highlight that it's a childlike behavior, is more heartbreaking it is, because it's like, poor guy.
And the fact that his PTSD plays into his transformation into what essentially is a destructive monster that's uncontrollable. Like, these themes, you would think, when you play the game, if you just play the game, you don't know anything about the lore, and you play Gnar, right? You're like, okay, well, you would never get that depth from what we get in the stories. And that's why we love telling these stories and going through them and, representing the themes more clearly to people who don't really get it on the surface. Because we've had plenty of characters up to this point where this applies, right? Like Ari's one of them. Speaking of Gnar, once again, Annie, we reference Annie a lot. Her early stuff, like her early life, is definitely related to this as well, which that one makes more sense on its face, right?
Yeah.
But there's so much depth to so many characters that when you look at their character as far as just the marketing for playing the game, it's so much more different from what's actually going on.
Yeah, I mean, especially I remember when Gnar first dropped into the game, and like myself and a lot of other League players, we just joked of like, haha, Hulk mad, Hulk smash.
Yeah.
Like, because that's what the gameplay looks like. It's this little guy bouncing around, and
Yeah.
then all of a sudden,
And his sound, his voice lines are so good.
Anga bunga.
Yeah.
But and then all of a sudden he's gigantic and tossing a boulder or tossing an entire team
Yeah.
into a wall. So you don't get the nuances of like what makes Gnar different from the Hulk.
Yeah.
With like just by playing the game. Like, it's these stories that kind of break it down more, because for the Hulk, yeah, sure, we could go into like the radiation of Eric Banner and stuff, but it is a transformation of just anger.
Yep.
Where with Gnar still doesn't even know what the transformation is.
Yeah.
Because in his bio, that transformation is triggered by just seeing an enemy, and it's almost more self-defensive.
Yeah.
And he doesn't even realize he's transforming. He's like, I'm going to throw a snowball at this monster. and then sees half of a mountain in his hands flying at the guy. Like he doesn't even realize he's transformed.
Yeah. And
Where
Hulk
like
is such an apt description, right? Because the big difference is that he's an adult and he's one of the most intelligent men in the world in that universe, where we're dealing with a child essentially who's going through this type of transformation. So, yeah, like I said, this story was surprising the first time I read it.
oh, it's very surprising, and I was not prepared for like how much depth it would give, especially like considering the fact that I mean kind of a spoiler to the listeners. We're at the end of the story, like breaking it down into bullet points. There's not a lot to really cover. It's like it's a snow day. He doesn't like it. He wants to go outside and play. Someone comes inside to play instead, and then he learns about death. And like that, it's like sure, that's like generic. It's as generic as you could get as far as the bullet points, but that's still only like 5 bullet
Yeah,
points.
and that
Like,
fifth one is a doozy.
but the fifth one is such a doozy, and it answers so many questions. And I think it's just incredible the depth to it because you don't realize there are questions that you needed to ask.
Exactly.
Like this is a story that's like, oh, by the way, you haven't been asking the right questions. Here are the answers to them, though. So I think that's why I did enjoy this so much.
Yeah, and it wraps up with, because we got a little bit more sadness for you. He ends up calming down. He goes back into the cave, which is now his safe space. He's shrunk down again. And then he ends up hugging his boomerang tightly because that's like the closest thing, as Hetch mentioned, to him, to like a loved one. It's his hug box is literally the boomerang. But there's one other thing he decides to do when he finally calms down is he skitters back outside the cave where the creature is, quote unquote, sleeping. And then he begins to slowly place snow on top of this giant creature to him now, because he's smaller, with his tiny paws. I think it was a little raccoon, like scooping snow. And it's the saddest image. But his mentality at the end here is, quote, because for Gnar, it is sleeping after all, and it will need a blanket. Oh. And that is like, what are you doing? Who wrote this? You psycho. Why do you do this?
Like, oh my god, I need to find a boomerang and hold it tightly. It's so heartbreaking.
But that, we wanted to go deep into the ending of this story because that ending makes the whole story worth it. It's a shorter one. Still read it if you even if you listen to this to really get that gut punch. But as always, this is a short one. Thanks for listening, and we'll be back soon with the next episode.
Yeah, take care, everybody.